It wasn't the Visigoths sacking the city, it wasn't a sudden plague. It wasn't even the corruption of a single emperor. It was the slow mathematical inevitability of a ledger that could no longer balance. The pattern is unmistakable. History does not stutter, it rhymes with terrifying precision. We look at the map of the world today, we see the United States, we see the rising ambition of China, we see the echoes of Rome and London, but to understand where we are going, we must look at the mechanics of how we got here. This is not a political opinion. This is an autopsy of dominant powers. The cycle is driven by incentives, it is driven by the cost of complexity, it is driven by the trap of debt. We will examine 3 specific historical precedents. We will look at the Roman Empire, we will look at the Spanish Empire, we will look at the British Empire. Then we will overlay this template onto the modern global economy. The arithmetic is merciless. Think about what that means. When an empire expands, it requires bureaucracy, it requires garrisons, it requires bread and circuses to keep the peace. Eventually, the cost of maintaining the status quo exceeds the revenue it generates. The incentive is always the same: debase the currency, print the difference, kick the can down the road. The risk is that the road eventually ends. Let us begin with the archetype of all Western decline. The Roman Empire. The year is 64 AD. The emperor is Nero. The treasury is empty. The costs of rebuilding Rome after the Great Fire are staggering. The military demands its wages. Raising taxes is politically dangerous. So Nero makes a choice that changes history. He orders the mint to reduce the silver purity of the denarius from 100% to roughly 90%. It seems like a small adjustment, it seems like free money, but the signal was sent over the necks. To centuries, the silver content crashed to less than 5%. The state had chosen the easy path, but the market always finds the truth. Prices for wheat and tunic cloth skyrocketed. The Roman soldier, once the backbone of the empire, found his pension worthless. He demanded payment in goods, in land, in anything but the coin of the realm. The middle class was hollowed out, the social contract shattered long before the city walls were breached. Just like Rome, the Spanish Empire in the 16th and 17th centuries fell victim to the illusion of infinite wealth. Under the Habsburgs, Spain controlled a territory upon which the sun never set. They had discovered the vast silver and gold deposits of the Americas, specifically the mountain of silver at Potosi. Ships laden with bullion arrived in Seville every year. It should have been a golden age of prosperity. Instead, it became a cautionary tale of monetary velocity and inflation. The crown used this influx of metal not to build productive industry, but to finance endless wars in the Netherlands and to import luxury goods. The sheer volume of silver devalued the currency. This phenomenon, known to historians as the price revolution, saw the cost of living in Spain soar. A simple laborer in Castile found that while there was more silver in circulation than ever before, a loaf of bread cost more than he could earn in a week. The domestic economy collapsed because it was cheaper to buy foreign goods than to produce them at home. The empire was hollowed out, rich in metal but poor in capacity, leading to a long, agonizing decline into irrelevance. Just like Spain, the British Empire walked the same path from dominance to debt. In 1914, Britain was the creditor to the world. The pound sterling was the undisputed global reserve currency, as good as gold. But the costs of maintaining a global naval presence, combined with the devastating expense of 2 world wars, broke the treasury. By 1945, Britain was effectively bankrupt, surviving on loans from the United States. The decline was managed, but it was relentless. The government turned to financial repression to service its debts. The 1960s and 1970s saw the pound devalued repeatedly against the dollar. A British bondholder who bought gilts in 1945 saw nearly all their purchasing power evaporated by the inflation of the 1970s. The nadir came in 1976, when the United Kingdom, once the master of the globe, had to go hat in hand to the IMF for a bailout. The empire didn't end with a bang, but with a currency crisis and a plummeting standard of living. The pattern repeats in 7 distinct stages. Stage 1 is the era of sound money and limited government, where expansion is fueled by savings and production. Stage 2 sees the expansion of public works and imperial reach, requiring higher expenditure. Stage 3 is the peak of prosperity, where opulence leads to complacency and leverage begins to build. Stage 4 is the turning point. The burden of debt and military overreach begins to strain the Treasury Stage 5. It's the resort to debasement where the state prints or borrows aggressively to maintain appearances. Leading to asset bubble Stage 6 is the onset of severe instability characterized by inflation, populism, and internal fracture. Stage 7 is the collapse of the currency and the restructuring of the social order. Just like the British Empire entered Stage 4 in 1914 and Stage 6 in the 1970s. As current data suggests, the United States and China are navigating the treacherous waters of the late stages. Today, the United States enjoys the exorbitant privilege of the dollar, but its debt-to-GDP ratio rivals that of nations in wartime. The incentive structure in Washington mirrors that of Rome. It is politically impossible to cut entitlements or defense spending, so the deficit is monetized. Meanwhile, China faces its own version of the cycle after decades of explosive growth fueled by credit and infrastructure investment. It faces the law of diminishing returns. The massive real estate bubbles and demographic headwinds suggest that the Chinese century may face a liquidity crisis before it truly begins. Both superpowers are trapped by their own success and the massive debts required to sustain it. There is a common counterargument that modern central banks have mastered the economic machine. Proponents argue that fiat currency allows for flexibility that gold did not, and that technocratic management can smooth out the business cycle indefinitely. They point to the resilience of the U.S. economy post-2008 as proof that the old rules no longer apply. Here's the key: the arithmetic is merciless. No amount of technical sophistication can erase the fundamental reality that debt is a claim on future production when claims on future production exceed the capacity to produce. The value of those claims must fall. The incentive for every government in history when faced with the choice between immediate austerity and inflation has been to choose inflation. The tools have changed, but human nature and political incentives have not. The risk is that by suppressing volatility today, central banks are merely ensuring a larger, more systemic correction tomorrow. History offers three specific endgames for this cycle. The first is controlled decline. This is the British path post-1945. The empire recedes, the currency loses dominance, and the standard of living stagnates relative to rising powers. But civil society remains intact. The second is chaotic collapse. This is the path of the Roman West or Weimar Germany. The currency is destroyed completely, law and order break down, and the middle class is wiped out, leading to authoritarianism. The third is reset and restructure. This occurred in France in 1958 with the introduction of the new franc, or Germany in 1948 with the Deutsche Mark. Old debts are defaulted on or redenominated, and a new system is born from the ashes of the old. The only variable is timing, and Payne subscribed to channels that focus on long-term data rather than daily noise. Educate yourself on the history of money, build resilience in your skills and your understanding of how assets perform during periods of currency regime change. Would you like me to highlight the keywords in bold to make this easier to read for a voiceover?